Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. My neighbor was staring at my kid when I opened the door. I am Mark, 39, and that was the first moment I felt real fear. She was on the driveway drawing shapes and humming some silly song from school. His eyes followed her like he was tracking a target, not a child. I remember telling myself there had to be a normal reason, and that softness almost cost us. He was not on his phone and not cleaning anything or fixing anything. He just leaned on his porch rail and stared straight at my girl. No blinking and no fidget and no small wave when she glanced up. I stood in the doorway longer than made sense and waited for him to notice me. He did not move at all, and something tight pulled in my chest. I stepped out onto the concrete and let the door swing behind me. The sound finally snapped him out of that weird focus, and he straightened fast. His whole body changed like someone flipped a switch and turned on friendly neighbor mode. Suddenly he was smiling and lifting his hand and acting like we just bumped into each other. If you watched a clip of it without sound, you would think I imagined that stare. "Hey man," he called out like we were mid-barbecue conversation already. "Beautiful day for the kids, right?" His voice sounded too bright for that flat face I had just seen. My brain did this stupid thing where it tried to smooth everything over. I forced a laugh that came out thin and walked closer to my daughter. I wanted to stand between them without making it obvious that I was doing it. She looked up at me for half a second and then went back to her drawing. Whatever she saw on my face freaked her just enough to shift closer to my leg. I remember thinking I must look like the paranoid one now, and he probably loved that. He leaned on his porch rail again, but this time it looked casual on purpose. "You know, my boy keeps talking about your daughter. He says she is the nicest kid in his class and that they should hang out more." He laughed after that like it was just small talk, but his eyes stayed hard. There was a gap between the laugh and the eyes that I could not unsee. "We should really get them together more and let them become real close. Kids need that one person they can count on, that one true best friend." He stretched out the words best friend like he was trying a flavor he enjoyed. My girl kept drawing, but her hands slowed down and I saw her shoulders rise. Even she could feel that something in his tone was not normal anymore. "Yeah, maybe we will see how schedules look this month." The words slipped out before I could stop them because that is what polite neighbors say. His smile widened a little like I had just signed a contract in blood. He nodded and started listing ideas fast, almost like he had practiced them. He talked about study time after school and movie nights with the kids. Then he jumped to weekend trips and more plans that came too fast. Part of me wanted to shut it down right there and tell him to stop. Another part did that social math about not starting drama with someone who shares a fence. I could feel both sides arguing in my head while he kept smiling at my family. In the end, I just nodded and laughed again and hated myself for sounding friendly. Looking back, that small laugh feels like the first line I let him cross. My daughter tugged my sleeve and whispered that she was done drawing for now. She would not look at my neighbor at all, and that told me plenty. He noticed and rushed to fill the silence with talk about his boy again. "You know, he talks about her every night and says she is his favorite person." Hearing that did not sound cute to me, it sounded like obsession in training. I told my kid to go wash her hands and get some water inside. She shot into the house faster than usual and left her chalk where it was. He watched her disappear through the doorway and his smile faded for a heartbeat. It came back right away, but that tiny break showed me the real thing underneath. I still see that flicker when I think about this moment now. He told me we would talk more later and mentioned a few specific days like he owned them. I muttered something about checking our calendar and started backing toward my door step by step. He stayed out there for a while after I went inside and I watched from the hall. He was not looking at his phone or his yard, just at the spot where my kid had been. Back then I told myself I was overreacting. Now I know that was the first real warning. My phone buzzed while I was tying my kid's shoes for school. New message from him on the screen, bright and way too cheerful. "Heading out with my son now, we can walk them together." My daughter heard the alert and froze for a second, then went back to her laces. I stepped to the front window instead of replying. Right on cue, his door opened like he had been waiting for a signal. He came out holding a trash bag that clearly had nothing inside. He tossed it into an empty can and looked over at our door like a mark. My girl reached for her backpack and whispered that the neighbor would be outside again. She knew that at 8:15 he would be there, and she was right. He waved both arms when we stepped out, like we were late for a parade. I tried to text you, figured we could all go together. I saw it. I held the phone up and let the screen go dark between us. We usually drive, she's got stuff to bring in today. His smile slipped for half a heartbeat before he pivoted into another idea. Then maybe after school, my boy has been begging to hang out. He leaned on our fence and lowered his voice like we were sharing secrets. He tells me she is the only one who really gets him. My kid stared at the sidewalk and squeezed my fingers until it hurt. I told him we had a busy week and that we would see. That word again, we, like I had put the whole family on some committee. He nodded way too fast and launched into suggestions before I could breathe. Tomorrow works or Friday, we are around all weekend. We got into the car, and I could feel him watching the back window. My daughter turned her head toward me instead of looking his way. Can we just go? Her voice came out small and tight, and it punched through my denial. By the middle of that week, the timing became impossible to ignore. Every time she reached for the doorknob, his screen door would scrape open. Sometimes he had that empty trash bag, sometimes a broom, sometimes nothing at all. Always some reason to stand near our front yard and hover. Maybe you know that little argument you have with yourself in moments like that. Part of you whispers that people can be awkward without being dangerous. Another part keeps a quiet scorecard and circles every strange coincidence in red. I kept choosing the soft answer because I did not want to start a war. He stopped pretending it was just random when the messages to my wife started. It began with one short line about their kids watching a movie together. By the end of the day, he was sending long suggestions with specific times. I watched the thread on her phone and felt my stomach climb into my throat. Maybe he is just lonely. She stood at the kitchen counter, chewing her lip while she scrolled. He keeps saying our daughter is good for his boy, that she calms him down. On the screen, I could see his last text asking if he could handle pickup as a favor. I heard myself answer way too calmly that it was not happening. I typed back that we handled our own rides and pressed send hard. Almost immediately, another bubble popped up with an over-the-top apology and another plan. If pickup is too much, at least let them spend Saturday afternoon here. I told him we had family plans, which was a lie that tasted awful. He replied with a string of thumbs up and smiling faces like we were buddies. 15 minutes later, our doorbell rang, and my daughter flinched like it was a gunshot. Through the peephole, I saw his boy on the porch alone. He rocked on his heels and clutched a small action figure in his hand. Can she come out? My dad said this is a good time. My kid hovered behind me with her nails digging into my arm. I had to choose between being the nice neighbor or the strict parent. Not today, she has homework. I kept my tone gentle for the kid and cold for the man listening next door. His shoulders drooped and he mumbled an apology that made me feel like trash. He trudged back toward his house while I watched his father's curtain twitch. As soon as the door shut, my daughter burst out with everything at once. I like playing games, but he keeps staring at us when we do. She told me he sometimes stood in the hallway and listened, even when they shut the door. He pretends he is looking for something, but he just stands there and waits. That detail lodged in my brain like a splinter I could not remove. I asked if he had ever touched her or blocked her from leaving. She shook her head quickly, and that helped, but not enough. Because now I knew he was not just overeager, he was monitoring. I tried to test whether I was imagining the pattern by changing hours. The next morning, I left for work a little earlier than usual on purpose. As I pulled out, he was already outside with his son, both in their yard. He watched my car roll past with a tight jaw and no wave. That evening, I delayed taking out the garbage until later than normal. I waited, then opened the door fast and stepped onto the driveway. He emerged almost instantly, carrying 2 bags that looked suspiciously light. Funny running into you again, crazy how schedules sync when you have kids. He moved closer to our property line and lowered his voice like a coach. You should know the older boys on this block use rough language. He mentioned specific kids by name and claimed they were a bad influence. My boy thinks your daughter is pure. He wants to keep her that way. Something about the word pure in his mouth turned my spine to ice. I answered that she got along fine with everyone and that we watched her. He smiled without any warmth and shrugged like I had missed his point. We just care, that is all, some of us more than others. That line stuck with me long after I went back inside. There was a hint under it, like he cared in a way I did not. I watched him through the blinds while he stood in his yard doing nothing. Looking back, that stretch of days was the slow tightening before everything snapped. The school's number flashed on my screen while I cleared the table. I almost let it go to voicemail, then something in me kicked hard. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and answered with a bad feeling. Mr. Carter, quick question, did you authorize someone new to collect your child today? My knuckles pressed into the counter so hard it hurt. No, pickup is this only why. The secretary hesitated long enough that I knew this was not a tiny glitch. A neighbor came in and tried to sign her out. He said he was helping your family. My throat felt dry and hot at the same time. I asked for a name, already knowing which one I would hear. She read it calmly like she was checking off a list, and my vision narrowed. We refused because he is not on her card, but he insisted you forgot to update it. I told her firmly that no one else had permission, not ever. She promised to flag the file and ask for ID from anyone unknown. I'm sorry if this caused stress, we just wanted to double check. I thanked her through my teeth and told her I was coming in person. The drive to the school felt shorter than usual and longer at the same time. Every red light made me want to jump out and sprint the rest of the way. All I could see in my head was his face leaning over that sign-out sheet. By the time I walked through the front door, I was one wrong word away from exploding. The same secretary waved me over and slid a thin clipboard across the desk. This is today's visitor log. We had him write his information before we turned him away. There it was, his handwriting, our last name spelled perfectly, my kid's first name under it. Seeing it in ink hit me harder than the phone call, because it meant he had rehearsed this. He told us you were stuck at work. Her voice dropped, almost apologetic now. He said she gets nervous when you run late and he didn't want her upset. That part made me nauseous, because only someone paying close attention could use that detail. I asked if he had tried anything else, if he wandered the halls or waited outside. She shook her head and mentioned that a teacher escorted him back to the office quickly. Policy, you know, we do not let adults roam without staff, especially not near younger classes. It was meant to reassure me, but my mind was already replaying every warning sign I had waved off. When my kid walked out of class and spotted me, her eyes went wide. You're early. She rushed into a hug so fast she almost knocked my breath out. Over her shoulder, I scanned the parking lot like he might appear again at any second. On the way to the car, I tried to sound normal. Anything strange happened today? She wiped her nose on her sleeve and glanced toward the entrance doors. He was here, I saw him through the glass, he smiled like he was picking me up. That sentence rattled something deep in my chest. He waved and pointed at the office, then the teacher told me to stay in the line. She spoke in quick bursts, like she wanted it out of her mouth and gone. Was I in trouble? Did I do something wrong? I told her no, she had done everything exactly right. My voice sounded steady to her, but inside it felt like cracking ice. Just remember, if anyone other than us comes, you stay with your class. She nodded, though I could tell she did not fully grasp how twisted this was. On the drive home, she kept checking the rearview mirror from the back seat. Not to see cars, to see my face. Kids do that, they read your eyes before they believe your words. I forced a half smile and promised we would talk more later, once we were inside. The house felt different walking in that afternoon. Same walls, same rooms, totally new threat crawling under every surface. I wanted to call the police right then and dump the whole story on a stranger. Instead, I told myself to collect more, to stay rational, to not overreact and look crazy. He was in his yard when I stepped back outside alone. Of course he was, like he had a sensor wired to my front door. He pretended to be sweeping the walkway, short fake strokes that moved nothing. I walked straight to our shared boundary before I could talk myself out of it. "You went to the school." No greeting, no smile, just that line hanging between us. He leaned on his side of the low divider, eyebrows raised like I had surprised him. "Hey there, yeah, that was a me. It's understanding the office called me by accident." I laughed once, sharp and ugly, and pulled the folded paper from my pocket. What, they dialed random neighbors and gave them my kid's full name. I held up the copy of the log the secretary had printed for me. "This looks pretty deliberate from where I'm standing." His eyes landed on his own handwriting and his jaw muscles tensed. For a second his charm dropped like a mask slipping. Then he let out a breathy chuckle and shrugged, as if we were trading jokes. "Okay, maybe I went overboard trying to help, but I was thinking of her." There it was again, that word her, like he and I shared ownership. "You do not handle anything for my family without my permission." My voice came out lower than I expected, almost calm from the outside. Inside, I was seconds away from grabbing him by the shirt. He lifted both hands like someone facing a traffic cop. "Relax, they didn't let me take her, the system works right." He stepped half a foot closer anyway, narrowing the gap between us. "You do know how you come across up there, always hovering, always worried." My stomach dropped because I knew exactly where he was heading. I talked with one of the staff while I waited. He dragged that word waited out, like he enjoyed remembering it. "They mentioned you call a lot, that too much control can make educators anxious." That hit me in a place he should not have been able to reach. He noticed, of course he did, his smile sharpened at the edges. "Nobody wants to deal with a father who thinks everyone is a threat." He tilted his head, almost playful. "Once people stick that label on you, they stop listening when it matters." I heard the latch on our front door click behind me. My kid was peeking through the narrow pane of glass, hair messy from napping. He looked past my shoulder and saw her face before I could block his view. "Hey there, champ, we were just talking about how much we all care about you." She flinched at the sound of his voice and vanished from the doorway. That single movement told me more truth than anything the secretary had said. He noticed that too, but twisted it into something else in his mind. The satisfaction in his eyes made my hands curl into fists. "You stay away from the school." I stepped close enough to smell his breath and see the tiny twitch near his eye. "This is not neighborly help, this is crossing the line." He held my stare for a long beat, then smiled like we had agreed on nothing. "Lines move, man." He brushed invisible dust from his sleeve, casual and slow. "Kids grow up, people chill out, nobody wants drama on a quiet street." That last phrase came out flat, like a warning wrapped in a friendly tone. I walked back to my porch before I did something that would turn on me. He stayed where he was, watching my door like it might open again. My daughter waited just inside, chewing her thumbnail until it almost bled. I told her everything was fine, and I knew even as I said it that nothing was fine. The motion alert hit my phone after everyone was already in bed. I was half asleep on the couch, neck stiff, TV still running low. The buzz jolted me awake in that ugly way where your heart jumps first. I thumbed the screen, expecting a raccoon or a delivery truck, and froze mid-breath. The thumbnail from the door camera showed a person on our front step. Zoomed in, it was him, shoulders hunched, head tilted toward my door. He was standing close, closer than anyone does when they plan to knock. For a second I just watched, breathing shallow, not sure if I should move. He didn't press the bell. Didn't lift his hand. He leaned toward the door like he wanted to hear inside my house. My skin crawled watching his ear almost touch the wood, like he was listening for my kid. In his right hand he held something bright and small by his fingers. He rolled it once between his thumb and knuckle, slow and careful. Then he crouched, set it gently in the center of the mat, and straightened. The whole time he kept glancing off to the side, like he knew cameras were there. I watched him walk away down our path, casual and unhurried. He never looked back at the door, just at our windows. Instead of going straight inside his place, he paused in his yard. He turned his head just enough to face our house again, then finally disappeared. My palms were damp when I grabbed the actual handle and cracked the door. The street was quiet in that heavy way where every sound stands out. His place was dark, no movement, no silhouettes in the windows. Right in the middle of the mat lay a little circle of metal and beads. It took half a second for my brain to register what I was seeing. My stomach dropped like I had missed a step on the stairs. It was my daughter's bracelet, the one she had sobbed over at the park. She had begged me to search under the swings, and we had come up empty. I did something stupid then. I looked around the yard and driveway to see if he was watching. The only thing moving was a tree shadow across the neighbor's siding. I scooped up the bracelet and shut the door fast, heart hammering. Holding that thing in my hand felt wrong, like it burned a little. I turned it over, checked the clip, checked for any break, stalling. My kid had worn it every day for months, then it vanished in one afternoon. I knew exactly where she had lost it, and it was nowhere near our street. I walked straight to our bedroom and nudged my wife awake. She blinked at me, annoyed first, then confused when she saw my face. "What happened? Is she okay?" I opened my fist and dropped the bracelet onto the blanket between us. Her reaction was instant, no delay, no denial. "That's from the park, that's the one she couldn't find." She pushed herself up, hair a mess, eyes suddenly very sharp. "How is that here? Did you have it this whole time?" That accusation stung more than it should have, but it was fair. "If I had it, why would I wake you up like this?" I told her to grab her phone, that she needed to see the footage. We sat shoulder to shoulder while I scrubbed back through the door camera. There he was again on the tiny screen, repeating the same moves. Standing too close. Leaning in. Placing the bracelet like a gift from some twisted fairy tale. By the end of the clip, my wife's hand was covering her mouth. "He went to the park." Her voice came out thin, almost soundless, but I heard every word. "He followed us or he watched us there, that's the only way." We traded a look that said we both knew this was past awkward now. I backed up the feed to right after we got home that afternoon. Different angle, same day, my kid jumping out of the car without the bracelet. She had checked her wrist twice at the door, I could see it now. We had walked inside, frustrated but tired, completely unaware he already had it. The park itself wasn't in the camera view, obviously, so I switched tactics. Opened my phone gallery, scrolled through that day, searching for something useful. I had filmed her for a minute by the swings while she laughed with another kid. At the time it was just a proud parent moment, now it was possible evidence. I hit play and watched the shaky clip with new eyes. For 20 seconds it was only her, feet pumping, hair flying, carefree. Then in the far background, a figure stepped into frame near the trees. Same build, same posture, same weird way of standing too still. I paused, zoomed, cursed under my breath. It was him, partially turned, head angled toward the swings. He pretended to check his phone, then never actually looked at the screen. Just stared in that direction like he was lining something up. "Send that to my email." My wife's voice snapped me out of it, urgent and focused now. "Save the door clip too, don't delete anything, not a second." That was the first time she sounded more angry than afraid, which honestly helped. We argued for maybe 2 minutes about what to do next. She wanted to call the police right away and let them deal with him. I worried about getting brushed off, about being the dramatic neighbor again. In the end, the bracelet in my hand made the decision for me. "We're calling," I said, and I meant it this time. "If they ignore this, that's on them, but they need to hear it." She pulled up the non-emergency number while I paced the hallway. My chest felt tight, like there wasn't enough room in the house for air. While she waited on hold, I did something reckless and maybe necessary. Went back to the front door, bracelet in my pocket, adrenaline running hot. Through the peephole his place still looked quiet, no movement anywhere. I opened the door and stepped onto the porch anyway, because I needed to see. Halfway down our path I caught motion in the corner of my eye. His curtain shifted, just a fraction, then stilled. I stared straight at that window until my neck hurt, daring him to show himself. The curtain twitched again, like someone had taken one step back. The phone in my pocket vibrated, my wife texting from the other room. Dispatcher wants details, hurry. I started back toward the house, then stopped cold. The mat in front of our door looked empty without the bracelet, but not safe. I walked inside, closed the door, and joined my wife on speaker. The dispatcher's voice was calm, almost flat, like this was routine. I laid it out as clean as I could, skipping nothing important. The school issue, the constant presence, the attempt to sign her out, the bracelet from the park. By the time I finished, my voice shook in a way I hated. The dispatcher asked if he was outside right now, if anyone was in immediate danger. I told her he had just been here and might still be watching from his window. She paused, then said an officer would come by to talk with us and document everything. Waiting for that cruiser might have been the longest 20 minutes of my life. My daughter woke up halfway through, blinking at us from the hallway. She spotted the bracelet on the table and went straight for it, eyes huge. Where did you find it? Did you go back to the park without me? I covered her hand gently before she could grab it. It showed up on the porch. The words tasted sour, like I was feeding her poison. She looked from me to my wife, and her face hardened in a way I hated seeing on a child. He brought it, didn't he? Not a question really, more like she finally connected her own dots. I saw him at the park near the bathroom. I thought it was coincidence. That admission twisted the knife deeper, because she had been quietly assessing him too. I asked if he had approached her there, touched her, blocked her path. She shook her head, then stared at the floor, thinking it through. He just watched us pack up, then he walked toward the swings after we left. Every update out of her mouth made the room feel smaller. When the knock finally came, all three of us flinched at once. For a second I pictured him standing there again, holding something else of hers. Through the peephole I saw the uniform and almost sagged with relief. Almost, because I still knew how these things sometimes go. The officer stepped in after a quick glance past my shoulder at the street. He listened without interrupting while I replayed the door footage on my phone. His brows pulled together when the bracelet appeared in the frame. When he saw my neighbor's face clearly, he let out a quiet exhale. This is concerning. Those were his exact words, measured and careful, like he had practiced them. Do you have anything showing him around your kid away from the house? I pulled up the park clip and showed where the man appeared behind the swings. The officer leaned closer, watching the zoomed frame on my small screen. He didn't say anything for a moment, just replayed that portion twice. Okay, he murmured, more to himself than to me. This shows proximity, repeated behavior, and an item belonging to your child. He asked if we wanted him to make contact next door tonight. My wife nodded immediately, no hesitation, no second guessing. I hesitated, picturing the neighbor flipping this on us somehow, spinning a story. The officer caught that look and gave a small nod that felt human. I can go over, let him know we're aware and watching, he said. It won't be an arrest, but it sets a clear line. He asked for permission to mention the bracelet and school attempt. I told him to use whatever would make this stop, because we were done being polite. We watched through the front window while he crossed the small stretch between houses. Our living room lights were off now on purpose so we could see better. At my neighbor's door, it took a long time for anyone to answer. Long enough that I started wondering if he had slipped out the back. Finally, the door opened a crack, then wider when the officer spoke. The man appeared in the frame, hair messy, expression carefully confused. I couldn't hear every word, but some carried clearly enough. Concerns about contact with a minor. Unwanted presence at a school. Item left on their property tonight. My neighbor's hands moved a lot, wide gestures, big shrugs, the whole performance. He pointed once toward our house, then let his arm drop when the officer stayed neutral. At one point, he spread his arms like he was offering the whole situation up. Even from my window, I could tell the act wasn't landing the way he expected. The officer asked something that made the man's face finally tighten. He glanced up at our camera above the door, then back at the uniform. Whatever charm he had been trying to project drained out of his features. He folded his arms across his chest and stared at the ground instead. After a few more minutes, the officer stepped back and ended the conversation. He walked straight to our place again, his expression harder now. My heart pounded as I opened the door and let him in. Behind him, my neighbor stood in his entryway and watched like a statue. "Here's where we are." The officer kept his voice low so the kid in the hallway wouldn't catch everything. I gave him a formal verbal warning and documented it in our system. "He is aware he is not to approach your daughter, not at school, not here, not anywhere." I asked what that actually meant if the man ignored it. The answer was honest, and it did not make me feel better. "If he violates it, call us immediately. The prior report will help our response." He paused, then added that neighbors like this rarely escalate out of nowhere, they test first. That phrase sat heavy in my chest. Test first. All this felt like testing, like he was prodding our boundaries inch by inch. The bracelet on the mat felt less like a peace offering and more like a message. As the officer filled out the rest of his notes, my dog H'ter hovered by the doorway. He noticed her and softened his tone just a bit. "You did everything right today, staying with your teacher, telling your parents." She nodded quickly, clutching her own wrist where the bracelet used to sit. After he left, the house felt both safer and more exposed. We had proof now, a report, a warning on record, all of that. But the man who had stood at my door listening still lived 20 yards away. Every creak from the street made me check the camera again. I wanted to throw the bracelet in the trash and never look at it. My wife argued we should keep it bagged with the printed stills. "Evidence," she said, voice tired and fierce at the same time. She placed it in a clear bag and slid it into a drawer like a loaded secret. That night my daughter refused to sleep in her room alone. We made a pallet on our bedroom floor and she curled there silently. A few times she asked if the officer would arrest him if he came back. Each time I told her yes, more confident than I actually felt. When the house finally went quiet, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. All the little excuses I had made for him lined up in my head. Friendly neighbor, lonely father, socially awkward, misunderstood. Every single label I had used sounded pathetic now. Looking back, that was the exact night something shifted in me. I stopped worrying about being the overbearing parent who annoys staff. I stopped caring whether the guy across the yard thought I was rude. From that point on, the only thing that mattered was staying one step ahead of him. The first letter from his lawyer showed up on a Tuesday. I tore it open at the kitchen counter and felt my jaw lock. He was accusing us of harassment, of spreading lies about a concerned parent. Reading that, I understood he was not backing down, he was changing tactics. He claimed we were ruining his reputation on the block and at school. He wrote that my paranoia was damaging his child's social life. There was a line about false reports to authorities that might trigger action. For a second, I just stared at the page and thought, this is how decent people get flipped into villains. My wife stood across from me, arms folded tight over her chest. "Okay, so now he's putting things in writing," she said, voice strained. "Good, that means we answer in writing." She grabbed her keys and told me we were done handling this alone. The next day we sat in a cramped office across from a real attorney. I pushed a stack of printed screenshots across the desk with sweaty hands. The clip from our entryway, the school log, the park still, the text thread. Lined up like that, it looked less like overreacting and more like a pattern. He watched the footage without interrupting, which honestly scared me more. Lawyers usually talk, they love their own voices, this one just listened. When the image of our neighbor leaning toward the door froze on the screen, he nodded. "Yeah," he said quietly, "this is not a misunderstanding, this is fixation." He explained that a civil protection order was possible, but not magic. We would have to testify, show our proof, deal with his side pushing back. Judges like specifics, he warned, tapping the still with one finger. They care about dates, attempts, proximity, not vibes, no matter how right you are. Part of me wanted to drag my child in there and let her speak. Let everyone hear the fear in her voice when she described him. But I also did not want her anywhere near that man again. So we settled on school staff and myself as the main voices, and that felt heavy. While we filled out forms, my phone buzzed 3 times in my pocket. I ignored it until we stepped outside into the parking lot. It was our security app again, 3 motion clips back to back. All 3 showed him walking past our driveway slow, head turned toward our windows. "I'm done," I muttered, shoving the screen at my wife. "He knows we're pushing this, and he's pacing our house like he owns it." She reached out and gripped my forearm hard, eyes steady. "Then we finish it, we see this through, no half measures anymore." The hearing came faster than I expected, but not fast enough for my nerves. We sat on one side of the room, him on the other with his attorney. He wore a pressed shirt and a sad expression like he was at a funeral. I felt underdressed and overexposed, like every anxious thought was written on my forehead. The judge reviewed the files while we waited in tense silence. Behind him, the flag hung limp, and the air conditioner hummed loud. Stupid details, but those are what you notice when your life feels on trial. My hands kept clenching around nothing, just curling and uncurling on my knees. They had his lawyer go first, which I hated instantly. He launched into this smooth story about a devoted single father. According to him, the man adored his child, admired our daughter, and was trying to help. This all visit became a favor, the late-night drop-off became an act of kindness. He turned the focus on me in this slick sideways way. Talked about my anxiety, my intensity, the number of calls I'd made. He used phrases like overprotective tendencies and misinterpretation of normal neighborly contact. Every one of those phrases landed like a punch because they were close enough to possible to sting. I watched the judge's face while he talked, trying to read anything. Nothing. Just the same bland listening expression, the same occasional note on the pad. That blank look made me feel like I was shouting into a pillow. When it was my turn, my throat felt dry and tight. I forced myself to go piece by piece, like the lawyer had coached. The stare from the yard, the timing around our doorway, the school attempt, the jewelry, the nighttime approach. I played the clips on a small screen set on the table, hands visibly shaking. There is no clean way to describe how it feels to narrate that. You stand there explaining why a grown man watching your child is not innocent. You feel crazy for having to spell it out, and crazier if you say nothing. That is the part people don't talk about, how wrong it feels to justify protecting your kid. The principal had come in as a witness, which helped more than I expected. She described the day he tried to collect my daughter, how confident he had been. She mentioned his insistence that he was on our contact list and just helping. Then she added clearly that my child looked distressed when she glimpsed him through the office glass. The judge asked a few blunt questions that cut right to the nerve. Had he ever laid a hand on her? Had he stepped onto our property after the warning? Had there been any direct threats, any stated plans, anything beyond this slow creep toward her life? Answering those felt like tap dancing around a minefield. No, he hadn't grabbed her, and I hated that I almost wished he had for proof. No, I hadn't caught him inside our yard after the officer spoke, not on camera. Yes, he had used lines designed to make me look unstable if I pushed back. Then the judge turned to him and asked if he wanted to speak personally. He rose slowly, like a man crushed under a weight he didn't deserve. He talked about his lonely kid, his lack of close family, the quiet street. He said he had only ever wanted the children to have support and community. The worst part was watching him mention my daughter by name. He said it gently, almost reverently, like she was some bright spot in his gloomy life. Hearing her name in his mouth made my chest tight, and I think the judge saw that. For a second our eyes met, and I let every ounce of fear show. After both sides finished, the judge sat quiet for a full minute. I could hear the ticking of the clock above the door, each click too loud. My daughter waited outside in the hall with my sister, thankfully unaware. I imagined her sitting there swinging her feet, trusting us to handle this. When the decision finally came, it was delivered in that monotone court voice. He granted a protective order with specific distance rules and contact restrictions. No approach within a set range of our child, no contact at school, no direct messages. Because our homes were fixed, the line between properties became law instead of just paint. I felt relief and disappointment at the same time. I had secretly wanted him forced out of the area entirely. Instead, we got a legal fence that might or might not hold. Still, it was more than we had the night he left that jewelry at the door. Outside the courtroom, we crossed paths near the elevators. He walked with his attorney, shoulders relaxed, mouth set in a neutral line. As they passed us, he glanced sideways and locked eyes with me for a fraction. He didn't speak, but the look said, clear as anything, this is not over. My daughter spotted him at the same time and shrank behind my leg. He noticed that too, and for once his face slipped in public. Something ugly flashed across his features, gone in an instant. The elevator doors opened, and he stepped inside without a word. After that, life turned into a tight routine built around invisible boundaries. I changed how we parked so she never had to walk along the property line. We picked new routes to school, even if they took longer and wasted gas. It all felt ridiculous and necessary at the same time, like wearing armor in a grocery store. The school updated her file with bold notes about the order. Only listed relatives could take her, no exceptions, no favors, no friendly neighbors. Staff started greeting her by name at the front entrance, eyes sharper now. More than once I caught them checking the sidewalk behind us, just in case. At home, I turned into that parent I used to silently judge. The one who stands on the steps until the kid is fully inside with a friend. The one who checks locations twice. Who texts too often, who watches the clock. I used to think those people were wound too tight. Now I understood they just knew something the rest of us ignored. He tested the order in little ways that drove me out of my mind. Standing exactly at the edge of his yard while we loaded the car. Lingering near his mail while my daughter stepped out of our front door. Never crossing the line on paper, always pushing it in practice. Each time I felt that familiar pressure to not make a scene. Call the police again and risk them rolling their eyes or stay quiet. Most days I took screenshots and saved timestamps instead of dialing. I turned into my own private detective, and it felt exhausting and ugly. It wore on our house more than I wanted to admit. My wife and I fought over stupid things that were not actually about dishes. Every disagreement somehow looped back to whether we should move, whether we could. Money, school, family, everything piled onto one simple fact: he still lived right there. One night I snapped at my kid in a way that still makes me wince. She stepped outside to grab a toy she'd left on the front step. I saw the door open on the security app and sprinted like the place was on fire. Do not go out alone, I barked, and she jumped like I had hit her. Her eyes filled with tears so fast it knocked the wind out of me. I was just grabbing it, she whispered, hugging herself. In that moment I felt like both a protector and a bully, and neither felt great. I knelt, apologized, tried to put the fear into words without putting it into her bones. She started sleeping with music playing every night after that. Not loud, just enough to cover creaks in car doors and distant footsteps. She said it helped her not listen too hard when the house settled. That phrase broke me a little because kids should never have to manage their own fear like that. We added more cameras around the place, even inside facing the entries. The app on my phone became the first thing I checked in the morning. Sometimes I would wake up at 3 a.m. and swipe through feeds half-conscious. Most of the time there was nothing, which somehow made the rare alerts worse. He started leaving his exterior light on all night after the court date. At first I told myself it was random, maybe he just liked it bright. Then I realized it gave him a clear view of any movement in our driveway. Our windows reflected that glow, a constant reminder that his house was pointed at ours. One late evening I stepped outside to take out the trash, trying to breathe. I heard a faint click from across the gap, like metal on glass. I looked up and saw his outline in the lit window, completely still. He wasn't doing anything that violated the order, he was just there, watching. I stood in our yard longer than I should have, staring back. Two stubborn silhouettes trying to outlast each other in the dark. In the end I turned and walked inside, because my daughter needed me more than my ego did. Leaving him there felt like backing off from a dare I could not afford to accept. We did report a few of those edge cases over the next months. Sometimes officers cruised past, sometimes they knocked on his door briefly. Every time, I worried it would only feed whatever twisted thing kept him fixated. But doing nothing felt worse, like cooperating in our own intimidation. People ask why we did not just move the second things got weird. They picture a for sale sign and a fresh start across town. Real life is loans, timing, jobs, and a kid who finally feels safe at school. So instead of instant escape, we built little defenses and waited for our chance. That is where we are now, if you're still listening. Living next to a man who has legally been told to stay away from my child. Working, saving, planning routes, checking cameras, pretending to be normal for her sake. Every small choice shaped by the house 10 steps from our own. I know some people reading this will think I'm still too extreme. Others will wonder why I ever waved at him that first day. Believe me, I have replayed every decision until my head hurt. If I could go back the second I caught him staring, I would never laugh anything off again. The last clip on my phone is from last week, around midnight. He walks out to his yard, stands at the boundary, looks at our dark windows. Then he turns and goes back inside without crossing anything on paper. The system calls that compliance, my gut calls it rehearsal. So that is my life now. A quiet street, a thin court order, a child who sleeps with music on. And a man next door who thinks he's found a loophole in the idea of safe. If you ever catch someone watching your kid too closely, trust that first jolt in your chest because I wish I had.